When I first met Tim, it was at TacCon, and I took one of his modules, and he was like, "Hey," he took my hand and he was like, "Hey, this is what I'm feeling for with my grip. Like, I want you to feel like this, and this right here is what your trigger should be feeling like." And I'm like, "Okay," because I was able to feel it, not just to watch someone else do it, but I was
Mhm.
able to feel it. And then while we were shooting, that was what I was feeling for. So, like, the stuff like that is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, that and I don't I honestly like I am I fear saying I came up with that, it just because there is nothing in the realm of shooting, right? Whether it be pistol shooting, rifle shooting, performance shooting, defensive shot, I don't care what, the entire spectrum of shooting. There's nothing to me that like in the last 5, 10, 15 years that has been like, you can pinpoint one person to say, oh, they invented that concept or it's just not there. So I'm very hesitant or apprehensive to say, hey, I came up with the handshake thing because, and I don't know where I might have picked up on that. I really don't. If I did, I would give full attribution to whoever I picked it up from. But it was just something that stood out to me, like how do you convey to somebody how to truly kind of feel what their grip pressures should feel like, how they're exerted on the gun, and to what extent with each hand. And so, to me, it was just kind of one of those things that honestly, I think I was working with a student, just like a single kind of one-on-one, um, private coaching session one time. And it was just one of those things where I was like, man, how are you gripping the gun? He's like, wow, I'm gripping it hard and I'm gripping it harder. And I'm doing what all of these other people say to do. And I was like, okay, great. And I was like, man, how do I'm like, you know what? I want you to shake my hand. I want you to apply as much grip to my hand as you're applying to that gun. And man, as soon as he put his right hand out and like snatched up my hand and he gripped a hold of it, I was like, holy cow. And I was like, all right. So like, how are you manipulating the finger? And so he releases my hand. I was like, no. I want you to continue like crushing my hand the way you are, but I want to feel how you're manipulating the trigger with just your trigger finger. I was like, so just think about like pressing or pretending to press a trigger. And when he did, and you could feel his entire hand squeezing, like as a result of having too much grip pressure like built on the gun and him not being able to fully isolate that finger. I was like, man, like back your pressures off a little bit. Like that is a ton. Like how do you even have anything left over like bandwidth wise to get that finger to work? And he was like, I really don't know. And so he was squeezing and squeezing and squeezing. I was like, I'm all okay. I'm really curious now, but I got to feel it by itself. So I reached out my left hand. I was like, squeeze my left hand with your support hand as hard as you typically do. And he was like, he had to think about it for a minute. And he goes, and he latches on. But the hand pressure was just so kind of lacking in comparison to what his dominant hand pressure was. And I was like, oh, this makes total sense now. Like this gives me an understanding of where you're coming from. I'm like, okay, shake your hands out, right? And so he shook his hands out. I was like, I want you to feel how I approach the grip. So I shook his hand and kind of did the same thing. And I was like, now, do you feel any part of my hand moving against your hand at all when I'm pressing, pretending to depress a finger? And he was like, no, not at all. And I was like, right. Is my grip on your hand that crushing? And he was like, not at all. He goes, in fact, it's surprising me that's truly how you're gripping the gun. And I was like, well, you try to match that. So when I got him to kind of match the same grip, and it was just kind of one of those things where like he's having these light bulb moments, and at the same time, from an educator, I'm having these other light bulb moments where we're just both like, I think in the in the book The Talent Code from David Coyle, there's a chapter in there where they talk about talent and uh, the HSE, the holy shit event. Excuse my language. But
No, it's fine. Yeah.
we both have those like that. Oh my God, how did this even happen? And that was kind of one of those like HSEs for me. It was like I'm having the same light bulb moments, but for different reasons than the student was. And then I mean, ever since then, that student had become like a really good friend of mine as well, and had been since before then. But he was like, dude, he goes, nobody has ever explained grip to that depth the way you did. He goes like, that's gold. You've got to like don't ever shortcut that thinking that people are just going to assume they know what's going on. And I was like, okay. And unfortunately, I mean, maybe I've gone too far the other direction. Like in my 2-day class, I tell people, I try to warn them ahead of time. I'm like, okay, when we sit down and do kind of meet and greets and introductions on day one of class after our safety brief, I was like, I'm going to warn you guys now, we're going to get into the weeds when it comes to grip. And I have been accused of this entire class, instead of calling it Tim Herron's, practical performance class, as being like Tim Herron's 2-day grip clinic. I'm like, we're going to get in the weeds, and it's going to take about 45 minutes to a solid hour just to cover the concept of grip. And I apologize now for it being long-winded, but I think it's important. And I've yet to really have anybody, even, students that have come to multiple classes, that are, multiple offenders, to come back to class and be like, dude, I'm glad you've not shortcutted that. I'm glad you've not, cut it in half. Like, it still needs to be what it is in order for people to really grasp and understand the concept. So, I mean, I always feel guilty because, a lot of times you've got a line of 14 or 15 shooters on the line, and they're like, oh, okay, I get it. I understand it. But like, I think sometimes they also understand the benefits of, no, let me have hands-on with every single one person on the line. I mean, even at TACCON, where you got 24 students, I wanted to make sure that, it gives me an opportunity to get hands-on with every student to really convey that message to them personally, and it's worked out great. And it's become like it's become kind of the building block to everything else that we do in performance shooting. So yeah, it's kind of grown and evolved along the way. And, I've got the wording now really sorted out to it, so it's not just long-winded talking, but it gives people an experience, and it's something I don't think that they get as in depth, dare I say, at just about anybody else's class. And that's not a shun on anybody for any other class. I think that's kind of become my biggest point of instruction, or POI, is that particular block is where it seems like where most everybody comes back from and says, man, if there's one thing I got from a Tim Herron class, it was how to truly build a grip and how to truly learn how to not only control recoil, but visually see things while being able to grip the gun and have more control on it, and it's like, okay, I can live with that, so.
Folks, I want to give a very special thank you to Top Gun Shooting Range here in Memphis, Tennessee. This is where I teach personally. You can shoot our fully automatic machine guns in a safe and controlled environment. We also have a barbecue restaurant right here in the building. Ferguson's Barbecue has 4.7 stars on Google reviews, and also it's the only public range in the Mid-South that allows you to draw from the holster. And personally, I believe that that's the best way for you to practice for handgun self-defense. Folks, I do not shill for anybody. I promote the causes that I believe in, and I believe in Top Gun Memphis. Come by and see us.